Welcome to Native Bidaske, Native News Online spotlight on those making news and leading change in Indian country. Today we have a very special guest with us who is the director of a film, Lakota Nation versus United States. And we have Jesse Shortbow, who is a tribal citizen of the Oglala Sioux, that's out on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. He's the director of this latest film. And welcome, Jesse.
Welcome. Thank you, Levi. I really appreciate it.
Yes. Hey, tell us about the film.
Yeah, well, this is a documentary that focuses on the Black Hills Treaty of 1868, and kind of is a cross section of some active voices that, even if they aren't directly involved in treaty matters or things like that, it's just how this document, this treaty, is still relevant today, is relevant to the United States, and is not some sort of a scrap of paper with no meaning. And so we kind of explore that, and then explore the voices who the treaty applies to, whether or not they work with the treaty directly or not. Due to the pandemic, we obviously would have liked to have gather voices from all of the Oceti Sakowin, but we weren't able to quite do that. But I think that we have the people, the change makers within the region of South Dakota and around the Black Hills, that kind of echo the spirit of several people who this issue is very, very important to, and a lot of people devoted their entire lives to. So ever since the creation of the 1868 treaty, it's never been something that's been idle. There have always been agents from the Oceti Sakowin who trying to hold the United States accountable, and have done that ever since, over 100 years ago, and will continue to do that until the United States does what's right and honors that.
One of the producers was Mark Ruffalo, actor. Tell us about his involvement. He seems to be a friend of Indian country. He's on Standing Rock, and he's during the COVID pandemic, he's been a real great friend to the Indian country. Tell us about that relationship.
Yeah. Well, I didn't actually get to meet Mark during Standing Rock, but I did see him there. And I think what's unique about Mark is that I think he's a good indicator as far as where people that are non-native are kind of looking for some sort of alternative, as far as practices towards our environment, the world that we live in, whether that's on the land issues or even societal issues. I think that Mark recognizes that need for change, and I think that he finds that a lot of indigenous tribes have a lot of influence, and have figured a lot of things out as far as the issues that we face as human beings here on this continent and on the globe. And so I think that him being an ally and using his platform to try and make not just Native voices, but Native issues to the forefront is very beneficial. So I think that, again, it's like he's a good indicator where I think a lot of people that are non-Native that are looking for some sort of alternative way, he reflects that very much, and I think that that's why he supports a lot of indigenous efforts.
Yeah, and we're happy he does. I'm a strong believer that we need strong allies who are not native, and Mark Ruffalo certainly has been there for us. And I'm excited. And how did he get involved with the movie? How did he get involved with this particular film, the Lakota Nation versus United States?
Yeah, well, it's kind of weird. It's like a snowball effect, when this project first started out, it was very, very humble in the beginning, but as you start to take steps forward and the project starts to gather a little bit of momentum, and then Mark has got a good sense of things that are happening, and being that this is a documentary, something that people can access. He's got a good sense, and it gets on his radar. And I think too that I've known Mark a little bit through other work, that it was just an easy connection to sort of make. And I think that some of the people that we feature in the documentary, Mark is a big believer in, and he knows of several of these people before, through their own individual work that they do. So it just kind of became a perfect fit in that. And then once we initially spoke with him, I mean, it seemed that we were all on the same page.
That's great. That's great. Now, a lot of the viewers may not realize this, but the Mount Rushmore is part of Black Hills history. And many Native Americans, particularly the Lakota people, feel as if those Black Hills were desecrated when they put those presidents on faces on what is now known as Mount Rushmore. Now, was it 2-3 years ago, and President Trump showed up there with South Dakota Governor Noam. Did they do us a favor by showing up and then bringing more attention to the Black Hills? What's your opinion on that?
Well, you're very right, Levi. Mount Rushmore doesn't hold a lot of doesn't hold a high place in a lot of hearts of Lakota people, and probably indigenous people all throughout the region. And I think it is kind of a symbol of false bravado, and I think Custer kind of amplifies that. Yeah, I find a lot of similarities between, President Trump and Lieutenant Custer. The fact that, that sort of rash arrogance is very dangerous and deadly. And as you saw what happened, or as we know what happened to Custer, he led innocent people to, their demise. And I look at Donald Trump in the same light, that if, they're not very careful, he could, if he ever gets into a position of leadership again, or whatever he does, or, just even looking back, I mean, that it's very dangerous to follow that sort of style of leadership. And I think that Mount Rushmore is kind of like a paper lion. Even though it's made out of granite, it's hard, it's stone. But to what it represents, it doesn't hold much more weight than a piece of paper, because it's all rooted in a lie.
Now, during the presidential visit, and I guess he was the president, so we have to give him that due respect in that regard. But some of our Native people got arrested in like Nick Kielson, and I was happy they were there to protest and bring attention, and I think that's really my point. They brought attention to the fact that those Black Hills were desecrated, and now Nick is in the film, correct?
Yeah. Nick is definitely in the film, and we do.
Tell us about his role. What's he doing in the film? Is he?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just the thing, you know. Again, you know, the active voices of that within our people, you know, that are really trying to confront these things head on. Nick is definitely taking a charge on a lot of those things, and you know, I think that we definitely kind of show that and show a lot of that footage from that day, and it's so strange, you know, because it's just it's like I think a lot of people feel that the Indian Wars are something in the history books, something in the past. But again, it's that active clash, you know, that is still going on and has always gone on uh, against, you know, the agents of the United States. And the president coming to the Black Hills on that day, in that climate that we were in that year, um, a lot of stress that we were all under. And of course, you know, the pandemic was raging at that time. You know, Nick went and he and Crystal Two Bowls too. She was also there that day. Um, they 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 just refused to you know bend to that, you know, and they had to face the repercussions for doing that sort of action of standing in his way, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And but see, that's the thing, is that a lot of people don't I think outside in the United States, they don't understand, or they never ever get to see our people resist a lot of these things. It's always sort of never makes the media. I know that Nick's situation got some attention, you know, but it's like these sort of things are constantly going on, and yeah, it's a daily fight for our people, you know.
Very much so. And this and is Standing Rock in the film, or we can at least talk about it here, Jesse. I see the resistance, and of course, I would get the press releases and press releases from the sheriff's department made it look like all Native Americans who were at Standing Rock were criminals, and they really, how can I say, took a real public relations attempt to make Native Americans who were at Standing Rock as out to be criminals, and talk about that. I mean, that is something that.
Well, you
Go
know,
ahead.
Levi, one day, 2016, right? Right
Yes.
before right before August,
Hmm.
I was sitting in my house in the Badlands of South Dakota, and it was a hot summer day. You know, it was July, and went and got a glass of water. And the glass of water comes from the Missouri River. Uh, and I was sitting there drinking a glass of water. One of my friends from Dene country, and his name was Mackay Lewis, came all the way up from Dene country back in July to help out the Standing Rock relatives up there, and stand with them, you know, against the encroachment of that pipeline. And I sat there thinking to myself while I'm drinking this glass of water, I said, how in the heck can I enjoy this, you know, clean water and watch one of my friends travel several, you know, hundreds of miles to make a stand with the Standing Rock people, you know? How can I look at myself in the mirror and not try to do something and try to help? And from that day forward, um, I cannot tell you how remarkable a lot of those experiences were. Anybody that has a false idea that was rooted in criminality or anything, you can just go ahead and throw that out the window. There were so many amazing and beautiful experiences with just, amazing, good, humble people of all ages, from young little toddlers to even the oldest, our oldest of our elders. Everybody wanted something special to happen there, and it did definitely attract, a lot of magic. Now, in the documentary specifically, there was one instance that will always stand out in my mind, and it features one of our Oglala tribal citizens, and her name is Alex Romero Frederick. She's currently running for a district seat in South Dakota. Now, she came up there with the horse in those early days, before things got really big, and it was mostly the sheriffs and the National Guard wasn't quite involved yet. And one of the remarkable things I think I've ever seen in my life was Alex had a horse that, she hadn't taken out of, put in from its home environment and then put into this highly stressful environment. And Alex she took her horse up there, and there was a cell phone video footage of when Alex's horse and a couple other horseback riders confronted the police that were guarding a barricade where they were doing some work there, right not too far from the river itself. And Alex's horse, it's just strange. It's like that the horse knew what the people were there and what they were doing, and it knew that the men that were standing in front of her, these uniformed sheriffs from North Dakota, and that horse also knew that there was that tension going on, and somehow that horse and Alex were able to put, I don't want to say fear, but maybe it was fear. But those sheriffs retreated after those horses. It's like they didn't know what to do with the horses. They had no training or anything like that, and it was just a remarkable event. And when I think about Lakota history and events, to me, that's something that would go on a winter count, or something of historical note, that one of our tribal citizens, a young woman on her horse, was able to make those cops who were standing in front of several people and were ready to deal with those people, but weren't ready to deal with those horses. I think that was a very significant moment in time. And so we definitely show that sort of side in the documentary, and kind of let Alex explain, where she comes from, and how she ended up there that day, and other sorts of work that she's doing.
Yeah, I like to say Standing Rock was sort of an awakening for Indian country. And when you hear tribal nations came representation from the Arctic Circle all the way down to the tip of South America, that's a pretty powerful statement. I have a friend here from Grand Rapids, Lynn Bardwell is her name, and she's a former tribal counselor at Little Traverse Bay Bands of Odawa. She's made, I asked her one time, how many trips did you make? And I think she kind of lost track, but it was 6 or 7 where she took supplies out there. And so it was a good time to be Native American. And as I say, it's kind of an awakening of sorts for the younger generation to take pride in who we were with as Native Americans. And I was talking to actually Clyde Belcourt. I got snowed in one day out of Standing Rock, and we were going to come back to Michigan. And Clyde Belcourt, one of the co-founders of the American Indians, was sitting in the tent. And so, Jesse, as a journalist, I'm going, oh my goodness, I don't have any, I don't have any access to Wi-Fi. It's cold, it's blizzard. What am I going to do? And it's a waste of time. Then I saw Clyde. I said, oh, I can take my tape recorder. So I went over and talked to him, and he said, you know, Levi, he said, at Wounded Knee, there was never more than, I'm talking Wounded Knee in 1973, right?
Mm-hmm.
He said there were never more than like 200 people inside that camp at the village, at the takeover. He said, most people thought it was much bigger than that. He said, this is huge. And he said, we never thought we would see something like this in our lifetime. And of course, we lost Clyde earlier this year. So it was a blessing that I know Dennis Banks was at Standing Rock, Clyde, and I've actually spoke to Dennis Banks as well. And they just thought it was a new generation. And there was, in years past, Dennis would talk to me and he'd say, Levi, I'm just worried that there's not leadership coming up behind us that are going to really take on the activism role. And we know they're leaders, we know that, but you know, AIM was special in that they really they helped bring about the resurgence that we see in Native culture today. And I just wanted to add that to the point that what you're doing with this video, this film is powerful to the extent that capturing all that history and how it all relates and from one generation to the next is so important. And tell me, Jesse, what made you get into it? Why did you want to do this film?
Well, I guess it's rooted in my family. You know, my dad is a Lakota tribal member. My mother, she's non-native. And on my dad's side, my great-grandmother, her name was Kate Rubidoo Blue Thunder. And she lived to be 100 years old. She was born in 1890, and she lived till 1990. She was had a lot of oral Lakota stories, especially creation stories. And so stories were very important in her life, and the telling of those stories were important to her. And I think that I get my love of story from her. And then on the flip side, on my mom's side of the family, which is again a non-native side of the family, my grandfather was very avid historian with very little education, but yet he was very, very well read, especially on things of local interest. And he was very fascinated with American Indian history, especially in the Great Plains region. So I think with those two combinations of, you know, imagination, history, and those sort of things, that's kind of how, you know, I got into the world of storytelling. And, you know, it's just kind of crazy how things, I can't really say that I'm really good at one thing or another, but the one thing that I'm good at is observing. And the one good thing that I'm good at is, you know, just believing in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And once that this opportunity arose, it was something that I could believe in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how, you know, I got the ball rolling.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jesse. We come from a tradition of storytellers, and that's what it's about. Is that I like to tell people when I go out to universities and for other organizations, I say it's our time to tell our stories. So thank you for what you're doing, and It's very powerful. What do you see in the future? Now, most people don't know this, but the Lakota people have refused to accept a dime from the U.S. government for the Black Hills. Talk about that. What's in the future? What do you see happening?
Well, I mean, there's a couple things. One of the elders that we feature in the film is Phyllis Young, and she says something that will probably remain with me for the rest of my life. And what that is that they are Lakota people are waiting for the United States to do the right thing, and they're gonna hold them accountable. And I think that there's been a pattern of distancing themselves from this situation, and again making the Black Hills land issue a relic of the past, a dusty thing that doesn't really apply no more. But that's incorrect. As long as the United States is in control of things, and everything that the like the Declaration of Independence, everything that America holds dear as their justification for why they can have the right to bear arms or all these sort of things. If they believe in those sort of documents, then they have to believe in our treaty, because they're bound to one another. It's not a dusty document that you can just put on a shelf. It's very much alive to this day. We can be in denial and maybe say that it isn't, but we got to get away from that sort of thinking. As far as like the money, I know that's a hot topic issue in Lakota country, and I know that the refusal of that money is still a very strong priority. But it's really up to the people of the Oceti-Sakowin to determine that, and then it would take that act of Congress to try and come to some sort of resolution. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's just holding the United States accountable and making sure that people are aware of that. And that's the other thing, in South Dakota specifically, I know that there's a lot of discussion as political season ramps up in the state about, critical race theory and even Indigenous history, especially as it applies to South Dakota. And we are doing a great disservice to our young people, both Indigenous, non-Indigenous students, by robbing them of this history on how it pertains to the creation of the state. And I know kind of why, the reason why, because it makes South Dakota look bad. Because there's some things that need to be uncovered there, that it would be hard for people to face, information that would be hard for a lot of non-natives to look at, and those sort of things.
Yes. No, the film will be Lakota Nation versus United States. Will be shown at the TRIBECA Film Festival. When is that happening? And tell me this: how many more film festivals will the film be featured in?
Yeah, well, of course, when we started the team that's involved with this project, one of the big ideas was to try and get exposure at the highest level and the production quality of the highest level. And, we obviously, targeted a lot of the major film festivals such as Sundance here in the United States. But an opportunity presented itself where we could try to get this out as soon as we can because of the unique political climate that we're in with, a president that wishes to deal with Native nations on a nation-to-nation basis. And, of course, Secretary Deborah Haaland at the Department of Interior. So if we can help put some, and I know that the Department of Interior is actively, looking at how to partner with Native nations on, returning land or stewardship of land. Those sort of things are actively going on as we speak. And so to have this premiere this year was a priority because that way we can, generate a lot of attention to those efforts that are going on as we speak right at this moment. And so TRIBECA just happened to be right at the perfect timing that we could do that. And TRIBECA is a pretty large scale festival within the United States. And then, yeah, of course, there will definitely be a whole festival circuit that will take place, and we'll definitely get it to our people and make it as accessible as possible.
And make sure and I know they do a great job, your publicity team, get word to us so that we can get it out to Indian country, amplify it. Now, will you be attending the film festival, Tribeca? Or?
Yes, I'm actually here in New York right now.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah, we premiere tomorrow at 2:30.
All right. And what about Mark? Mark Ruffalo, will he be there?
I think Mark's actually on a shoot right now in another country.
Oh, so he has earned some money now.
Oh yeah. But you never know. You never know who There's quite a few other supporters of the film that are excited to amplify this to their through their respective platforms. So there's definitely a possibility that maybe some of those people might show up or two. But a lot of this, I've never been a part of a festival of this scale before, so I'm actually learning a lot myself as far as how everything's going to look tomorrow. But yeah,
thank you for doing what you do and representing, because your story, the story of the Black Hills is so compelling, and the film, to our readers and viewers, is called Lakota Nation versus United States. And thank you very much, Jesse, for coming on. Chi miigwech to you, and much success with the film. And to our viewers, check out Lakota versus United States, and I think it should get a lot of good play and be very successful. And thank you for watching. And if you haven't had a chance to get into the Black Hills, please do that. Study the Black Hills, because it's a really important part of the history. And what Jesse's trying to do is just really, really important. And to our viewers, we're going to show a teaser, and maybe Jesse, you can kind of tell us what they're going to see here, and as far as Lakota versus United States.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a teaser. I think that the coolest thing about this trailer is that it's narrated by Layli Long Soldier, and she's an Oglala Sioux tribal member. And the thing that's interesting about Layli is she really looks at language and looks at, like a lot of the treaty language and takes it through a really fine-tooth comb. And you'll definitely get a good sense of the not only just like the drama of the story, but just the compelling and beauty of it as well.
X marks the strange ways of time. How a century ago can feel like yesterday. And, quote, from this day forward, feels like never. X marks an agreement Whatever name one uses to refer to the Black Hills, it is unquestionably the place of our beginning. And another X marks this land as ours, unquestionably by treaty.